Okay, we'll start with this. Well, I'm sure most of you are aware that there appears to be trouble in paradise. The Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua fight appears to have hit some kind of a snafu. Per some comments from Tyson Fury himself, he says they've had a full year to make the Anthony Joshua fight happen, and it hasn't happened as of yet. We're no further forward than we were a year ago. It's got to happen sooner or later, but Top Rank has to give me 2 fights this year. I don't care who.
Isn't this the opposite of everything we've been hearing?
It's the opposite of what we've been hearing from Eddie Hearn. It's the opposite of what we've been hearing from Bob Arum. It's the opposite of everything we've been hearing up until this point.
I mean, it's not one way, you know.
If it were, then that would be different. But as it stands, we've been hearing a lot of progressive talk in reference to that fight from both Eddie Hearn and Bob Arum. This is the first sign of dissension, as it were, that we've heard in reference to this fight. As far as some insights as to why we might be hearing this from Tyson Fury on not fighting last December. It was just a big mess. I should have boxed because I've been so inactive. By the time I fight again, maybe June, if Joshua fight happens, that'll be a year and 6 months out, which is not ideal preparation for any super fight. Tyson Fury later on in the day went on to say, Anthony Joshua, don't be a chicken like you did versus Bronze Bomber. Come out and meet me for battle. Let me show you what a boss is. Any day of the week, twice on Sunday.
All right, enough of the dog and pony show.
Yeah, make up your mind, man.
I mean, this talk of carrying on in 2021, with or without Anthony Joshua, this is the kind of talk we were hearing from Tyson Fury right before the Deontay Wilder rubber match fell apart. What was supposed to be the 3rd installment of that saga. This is the kind of stuff we were hearing before all of that fizzled out. Now we're hearing it in reference to the Anthony Joshua fight, where all the talks up until this point have been very progressive, and they've been progressive on both sides, on the Bob Arum side of things and on the Eddie Hearn side of things. So how do we reconcile this? How do we make it make sense?
Fury's fucking mental. That's how we make it make sense.
He's a fucking cornflake.
This guy's always contradicting himself.
Always.
You're the one saying that you're going to fight 2 times this year, with or without Anthony Joshua, but you're calling Anthony Joshua out as if he's the one walking away from the fight.
Yeah.
Everything we've been hearing from Anthony Joshua has been consistent with what we've been hearing. There's no change. There's no change in his tune. The only change in tune that we've been hearing is coming from Tyson Fury, and it's a different tune than his own promoter's been singing. So what the hell is going on here?
Fury's bipolar.
I'll tell you what I think. I'm not going to jump to conclusions just yet. I'm not going to look at the first headline or the first couple of tweets or the first story that gets published. I'm not going to look at the first sign of trouble and run with it.
Not just yet.
Not straight away. I will say that these tweets from Tyson Fury are cause for concern because, back when things were falling apart with Deontay Wilder, when Tyson Fury first said that, he's going to go on in 2020, with or without Deontay Wilder. Back when the Agit Kabayel fight...
Remember that shit?
When that was a talking point. I figured that, Tyson Fury, even if he doesn't fight Deontay Wilder for the 3rd time, he's got to fight somebody, because I hardly believe he's going to go into an Anthony Joshua fight, having not fought since February 22nd of 2020. By the time the Joshua fight gets made, it would have been over a year since Tyson Fury had fought anyone. And I didn't think that under those circumstances, Tyson Fury would enter into the Anthony Joshua super fight, not off a year of inactivity. Tyson Fury's recent tweets confirm my suspicions to some degree.
Doesn't sound like he wants to go into that fight off a year layoff.
But if he has had a year layoff, it really is his own fault. If what was needed for Tyson Fury to return to the ring in late 2020 was a pay cut on his part, because, there's only so many people that would have been interested in seeing him fight Agit Kabayel. If that's what was necessary, then that's the sacrifice he should have made. The sacrifice that would have been needed so that going into 2021, he will have already shaken off the cobwebs and shaken off the ring rust. As it stands, he chose not to fight.
Oh, that's his fucking fault.
Could that be the reason we're seeing this? Could that be the snafu that is now holding up the Anthony Joshua versus Tyson Fury fight? The Tyson Fury doesn't want to go into that fight off a year layoff, off a year of inactivity. Is that what the holdup is? Because if that's what the holdup is, well, that's Tyson Fury's fucking fault. Never mind what kind of money you stood to make for the Agit Kabayel fight. The whole point of that fight was shaking off the cobwebs, shaking off the ring rust. Not sitting on the couch collecting dust so that by the time 2021 rolls around, you're primed and ready to go. That was the whole point of that fight, and he didn't have it.
Hey, that's his fucking fault.
And I don't want to jump to conclusions. I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to rush to criticism. I don't want to start throwing around the duck word. I don't think we're there just yet.
Bob Arum has to address this.
As does Eddie Hearn, because everything that Tyson Fury is saying here is in direct opposition of everything they've been telling the media. Tyson Fury, in so many words, is saying that we're no closer to finalizing that fight now than we were a year ago.
He's the odd man out.
Bob and Eddie have to reconcile why that is. And I expect that they will very shortly, as both Bob and Eddie have been doing the rounds on several podcasts, several media outlets, fielding questions from the boxing community that wants to know when we can expect to see that fight, as all the talks in reference to that fight have been rather encouraging, have been rather progressive. This is the first sign we've seen of trouble in paradise, and lo and behold, it's coming from Tyson Fury.
Ever the contrarian.
This guy can never seem to make up his fucking mind because he's out of it.
Out of what?
Out of his mind, out of his mind. He's out of his fucking mind.
Could just be pulling everybody's leg.
That theory might be more believable if there weren't actually cause for concern here, but there is. Tyson Fury highlighting inactivity, the Caballel fight that fell apart late last year, the hints he's been dropping before that. He cited inactivity and how it's destroyed yet another fighter after the Josh Warrington fight, when Josh lost to Mauricio Lara. And it seems that those concerns about activity, or the lack thereof, that they're present here. That's cause for concern. Yet another cause for concern is Tyson Fury's condition. There were some recent images of Tyson Fury taking a dip in the pool, and we could see that this guy, he didn't look fighting fit.
Yeah, he didn't look like he was getting ready to have a fight.
Your promoter and AJ's promoter are in the thick of ironing out a fight for you two guys, and now you decide to let yourself go?
They took care of the Usyk and the WBO stuff.
They solved that problem. Several weeks and months before that, we heard that these two guys had already agreed on the split. They'd already agreed on a 50-50 split for the fight. And everything we've heard since then has been rather encouraging, up until this point.
I'm hoping it's nothing.
But with Tyson Fury, you never know, because I reiterate, this is the kind of talk we were hearing right before the third Deontay Wilder fight fell apart, right before that fight fizzled out.
It's been a year since he fought anybody.
And he doesn't appear to be in the best shape. He doesn't appear to be fighting fit. There is cause for concern here. I'm just hoping that it's much ado about nothing. In other news, I'm sure that most of you have heard by now that all the particulars have been ironed out and the rescheduling of the Herring versus Frampton fight has been set for April 3rd.
Is that Donnie Nietes?
The one and only Donnie Nietes, former WBO super flyweight champion Donnie Nietes, that has been missing in action for,
I don't know,
over 2 years. That's right. It's been well over 2 years since Donnie had a fight. Donnie was last in action in late 2018 when he beat Kazuto Ioka, current reigning WBO super flyweight champion Kazuto Ioka. Afterwards, he was ordered by the WBO to defend his title against his mandatory challenger, Ashton Palikte, in what would have been a rematch between them. It was at that point that Donnie Nietes threw the WBO title in the air, vacated it, and went missing in action. The title was on the line in the Kazuto Ioka versus Ashton Palikte fight, and Kazuto beat the brakes off of Ashton, and he's been the WBO champion ever since. Now, late last year, news broke that Donnie Nietes had entered into a pact with the people over there at MTK Global. And he made it clear, he was very happy with the move, and he was looking to fight the likes of Juan Francisco Estrada and Chocolatito.
Oh, really?
Well, I don't know how the hell he's going to do that without a world title, because unifications are the order of the day in the super flyweight division. We know that Chocolatito and Juan Francisco Estrada are set to unify with each other very soon. Had Donnie not threw his WBO title in the air, he would have been in a pole position to be a part of that conversation. But as it stands, this 38-year-old super flyweight has been missing in action. He has no belt of his own.
Been out for 2 years.
He's set to be fighting an opponent that has yet to be announced on the undercard of Herring versus Frampton, taking place on April 3rd in Dubai. And, I think it's going to take more than just one gimme fight to prepare this 38-year-old former champion for the winner of Estrada versus Chocolatito, or some other engagement with Kazuto Ioka, or Jerwin Uncajas.
Nothing against Donnie, but it's the truth.
Listen, Donnie's got a hell of a professional record. 42 wins, only 1 loss, never been stopped, 5 draws. He hasn't lost a fight since, I don't even know, what was it, 2004?
And 31 fights since then.
Couple of draws here and there, but all the same. I mean, the guy's record is solid.
Very accomplished guy.
One of the most accomplished guys you've never heard of. It just so happens that Donnie Nietes actually graced the Ring IQ pound-for-pound list up until the point he decided to throw his WBO title in the air, per the rules that govern the list. No fighter absent of a world title can maintain a spot on the list. The list is only for winners and only for champions, reigning champions that are in possession of world titles, as that denotes their status and who they are in their respective weight classes. It's all a part of the bigger picture. As soon as Donnie decided to throw his in the air, he was ejected from the list.
Now he's coming back.
But at 38 years old, what kind of odds can you really give this guy to procure a world title in today's super flyweight division? Especially when unifications are the order of the day, and the guy might be 39 years old by the time he actually gets to fight for a world title. Donnie's got a birthday coming up in May.
And he'll have a fight before that in April.
It's a rather strange turn of events, if I do say so myself. We can expect to see Donnie on the undercard of Herring versus Frampton when it comes to the rescheduled WBO super featherweight title fight. You know that the fight was rescheduled because Carl Frampton supposedly had some kind of a twinge in his hand, some kind of an injury he either suffered or was trying to prevent.
Right.
But in truth, I don't know that I buy that story. Not on the heels of the gripes expressed from Brian Bomac McIntyre, Jamel Herring's trainer, who he never bought that cover story. We talked about it here on the channel.
The airfare was never sent.
Team Herring feels like they were kept in the dark about the whole goddamn thing, that if this fight is being rescheduled, it must be for some other reason, because they don't actually believe that Carl Frampton is injured. And I feel so inclined to agree, because the story is that the financials for the fight weren't all taken care of. All of that wasn't ironed out. We saw something very similar play out in reference to Billy Joe Saunders, the then WBO middleweight champion, and Martin Murray.
Years ago.
They were supposed to have a fight a long time ago. And the tickets for the fight, well, they weren't selling as fast as old Fish Eyes would have liked. As a result of that, Billy became mysteriously injured.
Oh.
Fight got scrapped. And Billy and Martin Murray, they ended up fighting years later. But, by that time, Billy was on the matchroom side of things. The basic idea here is that the financials for the Saunders versus Murray fight initially, many years ago, they didn't look encouraging. And Billy, all of a sudden, he injures his hands. I hear this Farrell Crampton
Injury story.
hand situation, and I can't help but notice a pattern.
What if Carl's not injured?
I think it would be prudent to operate under the assumption that Carl Frampton isn't actually injured. I think it would be prudent for everyone on Team Herring to assume that Carl's bullshitting and he didn't hurt his hand. They just needed an excuse to get the fight date moved.
And maybe it was because of the money.
Though regardless of why, the safe bet is to assume that this guy's not actually injured. You don't want to go in there thinking that there's something wrong with this guy's hand and operate under that assumption. You don't want to go in there thinking that you're facing an injured fighter and take your foot off the gas. The most prudent way to approach this Farrell Crampton fight for Jamel Herring is to assume that it was all bullshit and he's not actually injured.
He never was.
And for whatever reason he lied about it, he fucking lied about it.
Maybe he was playing possum.
Maybe it was for the money, but either way, it was all bullshit. And finally, per tweet from Michael Benson, Andy Ruiz Jr. has revealed that he is set to return in April. It was previously reported this will be against Chris Arreola. When asked what he's learned ahead of his first bout under Eddie Reynoso, he said, discipline, dedication, and training fucking hard, man. And, I maintain my original position that if Chris Arreola really is going to be Andy Ruiz's very next opponent, that's going to be his next fight, then it shouldn't have taken as long as it's taking, because that's a gimme fight. That's a tune-up fight. That's what that is. And that's okay, because Andy's rebounding off that loss to Anthony Joshua.
He can have a rebound fight.
But should it really take this amount of time to have a rebound fight? I mean, that's a lot of lost time. This is the kind of fight that they could have staged in a bubble. That way, the year of 2020 wouldn't have been a complete waste for Andy Ruiz, as time waits for no man, and boxing really is a young man's sport. I'm just saying that they could have got Andy out there sooner than
this.
sooner than it's taking. Better still, This past weekend's fight between Oscar Valdez and Miguel Berchelt has sparked my curiosity. It's sparked my curiosity as to what difference having Eddie Reynoso in Andy Ruiz's corner can have for him, because it's obviously made a difference in Oscar Valdez's corner. You know, everybody thought Oscar Valdez was going to go in there this past Saturday and he was going to get his head punched off. And that's not what happened. He boxed the socks off of Miguel Berchelt. And based on logistics and statistics and how Oscar was looking up until that point, all signs pointed to a Miguel Berchelt knockout win. And that's not what happened. Oscar Valdez had Eddie Reynoso in his corner, the same way that Andy Ruiz has Eddie Reynoso in his corner. And now it's a question of, can having Eddie in his corner have an impact on Andy the way it's had an impact on Oscar? Truthfully, the Chris Arreola fight won't be the gauge for this. The Chris Arreola fight won't be the barometer for how much of a difference having Eddie in Andy's corner will have made. It won't.
Not this fight.
Chris Arreola's a journeyman at this point. We won't truly know how much Andy has improved and how much of a difference having Eddie in his corner. We won't really be able to gauge that until Andy's in there with a live body. And I'm sorry to say that Chris Arreola is not a live body.
Be honest with yourself.
Chris is a rugged and rough warrior. Nobody can take that away from him. But Chris does not represent what challenges await Andy Ruiz in that upper echelon, that upper tier of fighters in the heavyweight division. Because, you know, Chris is a journeyman. So if Andy goes in there and he looks sensational, you got to take that with a pinch of salt, because it's Chris Arreola in there with him, not some killer. I'm curious to see what Andy looks like under the tutelage of Eddie Reynoso. I am. But the Chris Arreola fight can only tell us a fragment of the story.
A piece.
Not the whole thing.
Look for Ruiz versus Arreola in April.